Hello everyone, I'm Tom64.
I'm the Flameflower.
And I'm Richie.
And welcome to Sega's smash hit of 1995, the best spin-off ever devised by a team called Sonic. It could only be Knuckles Chaotix. And I'm bigging this up, but it's a very divisive game, is Knuckles Chaotix. First and foremost, you've got to get a special piece of hardware to be even able to play the fucking thing. Secondly, the main conceit is that you're tied to another character. You play as two characters at once, and you can choose your team via a combi catcher as you go through. I'm kind of jumping, ahead of putting the horse ahead of the Knuckles-shaped cart here, but I'll let Flame do his spiel in a little bit. But just a personal end-Tom kind of story for y'all. I personally remember back in the day when I was playing out in the garden as wee Tom64, waiting for this to arrive, essentially, and I just happened to go back into the kitchen to grab a drink, and there was the postman, because he had knocked at the door and hadn't got a response, so he just opened the door and came on through into the kitchen, and there we go.
Jesus Christ! Oh.
Well, I mean, it's an emergency good, isn't it? You need that Knuckles Chaotix delivery right away. It could have been a problem if you didn't.
Very true.
Before I go into, the characters and whatnot, Flame, why did you pick Knuckles Chaotix as the next game for us to cover?
Well, I feel like it's quite an interesting one in the sense that it's, in spirit, a classic Sonic game, just like 1 CD, 2, 3 and Knuckles, but in practice, you can kind of see from us pulling Espio around here that it's got its own flavour to it, which, as Tom mentioned in the intro, is quite divisive. I am of the opinion that this main tag-along mechanic here is so consistently annoying that I can't help but appreciate it. Because you've learned a lot of things through playing Classic Sonic on how Sonic physics work, and we're going to have the obligatory physics discussion off the bat because it's a Sonic game.
Yeah, and as you may have noticed there, they actually nerfed the spin dash's speed and momentum and whatnot, so you've got to rely more on the ring pulley system here.
Well, when you say nerf, I don't know whether that was so much an intentional nerf or whether it's just it happens because the other guy also has momentum, which will quite often work counter to your own. And what ends up happening a lot of the time is that unless you've spent ages learning exactly how this set of physics works, you're probably going to go flying all over the place. And I eventually learned to just embrace that.
Wow. So, Richie, just passing over to you, I know you haven't played many 2D Sonics, I'm not going to hold that against you, and I was joking last time, by the way, I just want to make that perfectly clear. I don't care if Rich has played a game or not, it's just helpful to the discussion is all. Anyway, I would imagine you know the new group of characters, the Chaotix crew, mostly from Sonic Heroes at this point, right?
Basically, yeah. I mean, that definitely was my first introduction to those characters. And so, yeah, I pretty much didn't know who the hell Mighty the Armadillo was until, I did a bit more research into the whole Sonic canon and characters that existed in it. So obviously it's cool that, they did have their own game before they got introduced to that. I mean, it would have been weird had they not, but Sega are well known for randomly introducing characters for no good reason and then tossing them the next minute that they really can't be bothered to use them.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's an interesting one. I will say, though, I can happily say that I have definitely played the next Sonic game that we're going to be covering. But yeah, obviously I've never touched Knuckles Chaotix before. But one of the things that I suppose I should probably point out, and it's just because you were talking about it with the physics, is watching it does look very much like it's not necessarily that the spin dash was nerfed, it is entirely related to the physics of the other character kind of dragging you back. So it's not that there is anything changed about the spin dash itself, it's that you've got a different set of physics affecting things.
Right.
And from the looks of things, yeah, it doesn't look the best thing in the world. It's certainly not something that I think I would find entirely all that fun. because it looks like it just feels like you are carrying like a sack of spuds behind you at all times.
Hey,
don't worry, we'll have Heavy later.
Yeah, Jesus, don't talk about Espio like that. He may be a ninja, but he still has feelings.
So it doesn't look like it's the most fun setup, but obviously, Flame, as you said, as long as it is consistent, that's usually the most you can ask for any gimmick. As long as it works in roughly the same manner all the time, then you can learn to figure out how to get over those quirks. And that usually, helps in the grand scheme of things of just making the experience that bit more enjoyable.
Indeed. We'll talk a bit more about these special stages when we get to the second one, but I'm a big fan of them, honestly. It seems to, well, fuck it, I'll talk about it now. They combine blue spheres with a little bit of the Sonic 2 stuff with the half-pipe and whatnot, but it takes advantage of the 32X's processing power to give you a more fully 3D experience, which I really enjoy, music and gameplay there.
What we've got right now is something that in itself may be quite divisive, because when you're picking your character, you can pick your primary character, but the secondary character who tags along is one that you have to grab out of the combi catcher, which is not entirely random, but it does mean that you have to work to get the particular character you want, and just pushing that button a little bit wrong, you might end up with Heavy, like we've got here.
Yeah, Heavy and Bomb are Eggman robots, so I guess we're working with the enemy, so to speak. We've got Espio the Chameleon, we've got Vector the Crocodile, who's kind of the leader of the Knuckles Chaotix, I suppose. Mighty the Armadillo, and Bomb and Heavy here. I believe Bomb and Heavy, they're exclusive to this game, is that right?
In terms of main appearances, I'm pretty sure, yeah. Like, they've never been playable anything else. They might have had a cameo somewhere. I think they were in one of the comic series, but I never read the old comics, so I can't confirm that firsthand.
Ah, you see, this also tells me that Richie never read the Fleetway comic, because Mighty was very present there.
I did not. I do remember briefly touching, maybe once looking at a Sonic comic, but I wouldn't for the life of me be able to tell you which comic series it was. Probably the Sonic the Comic ones, and I won't be able to tell you anything about the editions or whatever. I just remember it being a thing and just going, okay, fine.
Oh, cool. Alright, a little bit about the story here, and I apologise for wiki reading, but I don't have the original manual on me, so here we go.
God, Tom, what's wrong with you? Like, we expect you to have all of the Sonic stuff.
Don't make me slap you through the internet. Anyway, interestingly enough, it says the story of Knuckles Chaotix varies between the Japanese and Western releases of the game, with completely irreconcilable storylines separating the two. In Japanese, a mysterious island arose from the Southern Sea a few months after the events of Sonic and Knuckles. Dr. Eggman discovered the island and found a mysterious little ring inscribed with text dating from a legendary civilization. And it's one of the super rings of the floating island, which turned out to be the special ring once used by that lost people. Yeah, there's a lot of, like, fluff here, but he wants the rings to do a thing, essentially.
Standard Eggman plan.
Yeah, pretty much. It's the same as what he usually does, just with rings rather than emeralds. Got it.
Yeah, and in the Western one, essentially, the island that we saw during the tutorial stage, where Daughter Summer played, if you've played Sonic Generations, you will have heard that at the Collection Room, a really nice remix of that. That is Carnival Island. That's where this all takes place, essentially. And that's your lot. That's basically all the Western story has to give us.
So I was slightly distracted by the Heavy doing a little jig as he walks, because I feel like this was an afterthought to let you throw the partner characters into the ring.
Yeah.
Like, you got Knuckles' sprite, which, apart from being a bit thin because of some aspect ratio fuckery, seemed pretty decent, but it just seems a little bit awkward having Heavy here.
To paraphrase our good friend Tanner, fellow member of HFC, me on my way to get those toe picks of Rouge.
Well, I'm glad it was him and not me.
Yes, yes, indeed.
You're both as lewd as each other.
Jesus Christ, 2 of them! 2! How you vibing with the soundtrack thus far, Rich?
It seems okay. Like, obviously, I've got it relatively quiet so that it's not overpowering both of your dulcet tones. But, yeah, seems okay. Like, pretty much relatively standard Sonic fare.
See, to me, it kind of feels less Sonic than like what we're used to at this point. It actually feels more akin to non-Sonic Mega Drive games, which is kind of weird given, as far as I recall, the 32X did actually give them more sound channels to work with. It just seems to inherit a bit more of that twang that the other classic Sonic games seem to go out of their way to avoid.
Yeah, I can feel that. There's a sort of Dynamite-heady feel to the whole thing. And I'm looking at the composer's credits here. This game was composed by Junko Shiratsu and Mariko Nanba, and I've honestly not heard of either of them. It's actually a female duo of composers for this one.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I will say, in terms of just the development on the whole, this was not actually developed by a Sonic team. This was developed by Sega CS, another in-house development studio, and I did a bit of research into this purely to debunk a joke Thompson made to me in private, but this was like one of the games that Yuji Naka was not involved in, like similar to CD, and it kinda shows in a way. Like the Naka games got a bit of a reputation for being some of the more polished like early Mega Drive games, and I know like Sonic Team games being polished, this is a relic from history.
I know.
but like this, although it's not broken by any means, it does lack some of the polish from classic Sonic. Like you do get some performance issues, you do get some sprite flicker issues that weren't there in like Sonic 1 and 2 and whatnot, so that is something just worth bearing in mind here.
So, you know how you mentioned one of the composers, Mariko Nanba?
Mm-hmm.
So just looking at Sega Retro, and actually, Mariko's been involved in some more recent titles and some others that we sort of you would recognise. So Space Channel 5 Part 2 was involved in Sonic 06 soundtrack.
Uh-huh. Right.
Did some great songs there. Also some stuff for Sonic Rush Adventure.
Does it say what songs she specifically composed for 06?
Yes, so Wave Ocean The Water's Edge with Tomoyo Otani.
Nice.
Wave Ocean The Inlet with Tomoyo Otani.
Fucking hell.
That's a jam.
Soliana Castletown. Tropical Jungle The Swamp. Kingdom Valley The Wind, The Castle, Lakeside Water. The accordion song White Acropolis, Snowy Peak and The Bass. Various ones. Also seem to have been involved in Dreams of an Absolution.
Oh, yes, please.
What also makes me very happy was that she was also involved with Dear My Friend from Sonic Unleashed, a co-arrangement with Takehito Iguchi. And then she also did some work on Sonic Colors. Looks like mostly the area themes for various things, but also worked on Speak With Your Heart alongside Tomoyo Otani.
There we go. Now, that little capsule you saw back there, where it actually changes your partner character, I believe they sort of rejigged that for Encore mode in Sonic Mania Plus, which was our previous Sonic playthrough. And in fact, there's a lot of Chaotix vibes in Encore mode. Like, just having 2 characters at once immediately brings Chaotix to mind, but just like Mighty returning especially.
I mean, I guess that's probably what half the point was, because obviously you've got to think that the folks behind Mania are massive Sonic fans. I mean, why would they not be? But like Knuckles Chaotix is for the most part, for general audience, a pretty deep cut.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who obviously do know about Knuckles Chaotix, even if they don't necessarily enjoy the game, it's a important part of the Sonic history.
Yeah.
And so, if the idea was, well, let's try and bring back a character from Knuckles Chaotix, then the thought process of also having, well, let's also think about bringing back certain elements from Knuckles Chaotix as well to go with Mighty makes perfect sense.
Indeed. And, yeah, back there you actually saw Mighty. Just to stay on the subject of one of my favourite Sonic characters, don't ask me why, I just grew attached to this red Sonic, I guess. He did what I saw to be a wall jump. Now, is it true that different characters have different abilities, Flame, or are there shared abilities?
All the main playable characters have some kind of vertical movement. So Mighty has the wall jump, Knuckles obviously can climb.
Right.
You've got Vector who can do his like mid-air dash thing, sort of like what X gets in X2. You know, like they've all got some way of traversing up, which is kind of a necessity because this game's level design is very vertically oriented. There's a lot, like, whereas classic Sonic is usually very much a left to right thing with momentum challenges to like along the way, this game is very much a case of use the elastic mechanic to fire yourself upwards.
Right, yeah.
The goal for most level is in the top right of the map. And when you actually look at some of the full-size maps of these levels, it is a fucking mess. And I kind of appreciate that.
I'm just going to say the weakest part of this game is the main conceit, the gameplay itself. I'm sorry, but the ring system does not lend itself to good level design. It has to be big, it has to be empty, just to accommodate you slingshotting yourself all over the shop. Think back to like 3 and K, and there were different routes for the characters, like Tails and Knuckles. Like Tails can like fly to places, Knuckles can break through certain walls. But here, even with their like somewhat unique vertical abilities, you're still going through levels in basically the same way, so all the levels kind of start to blend together, and that would be fine if there were maybe like 2 acts and then a boss in sort of traditional fashion, but here there's 5 acts per zone. Yeah, I've never heard of a thing ever happening like that again in the franchise's history.
Well, other than Sonic Colors, but yeah.
Not just Sonic Colors, also technically Unleashed for the night stages.
Yep, get fucking told, Tom.
Yeah, your point still stands.
That's a fair comment, but I would say it works out better in Colors because each act tends to have a different gimmick, or, you know, is aesthetically different, at least visually, to the one that came before it. You'll still say being like Planet Wisp, but you're doing something different. Here it's just like the same trope again. Maybe there's some more platforms and whatnot, but for the most part it just feels more like padding than anything.
Yeah, I can see that.
What it ultimately comes down to, the thing that rubs it in for me in particular, is because of how the level unlock system works, which I'll get to in a minute. It means that you can't effectively have level scaling, so you kind of don't really have like an easier level that's followed up by a more difficult level and then a really hard one at the end. Like, the way the level unlock system works, and you've seen me go to that little device a couple of times now in the playthrough, it's again a like gacha kind of thing. So it's almost random. For the sake of the playthrough, I have organised these so that we go through the levels in order, just so it's slightly easier to follow. But when you play this yourself, you will most likely go to the levels in all kinds of orders.
Yeah. And
that means that they have to bear in mind the fact that you could possibly go to the final stage first. And so, you know, you can't really balance the difficulty curve like that. You have to have them all accessible as potential first levels.
Yeah, that just seems flawed.
Which, it's an interesting idea, it just doesn't really work in practice. And if they were gonna do something like that, I suppose it wouldn't be quite so bad if you had like later acts off limits. So like maybe you went to Amazing Arena first or whatever, but then it'd lock off Amazing Arena Act 4 and 5 and there'd be the harder ones or whatever, you know, like, so there was still a bit of early game difficulty and late game difficulty, but as it stands right now, The only difficulty in this game is the control. And that's something that I've never liked in games, because the control should be the part that's easy to get a feel for. It should be using that control and in a way that responds to the level design that's your challenge. But this is the same sort of issue I have for Secret Rings, in that the control is a difficulty. If you had a standard control system like any other 3D games running through Secret Rings levels, it would be the easiest fucking game in the series. But the only difficulty there is that when you try to go forward, you might go flying off to the right or somewhere behind you or some shit like that.
Yeah.
And it's the same sort of situation here. Like, if you just had, like, Knuckles as Knuckles usually controls here, he could just climb up all the walls and there'd be nothing. So it kind of takes a lot of the substance out of it. And one thing you will realise throughout the course of this game is there are very few enemies as you go along. And in a way, I'm thankful for this, because this leads into the game's graphic style, the art style. This looks really pretty to look at now. It's not so great to play, because the enemies blend in with the background, because everything is so loud and colourful. Like, it's a beautiful art style, but practically speaking, it just doesn't work for that.
Well, I'd say occasionally it looks beautiful. There's even times of day for, like, stages and whatnot, which apparently, if I recall Cybershell's video correctly, affects the difficulty of the zone's boss. I'm not sure how true that is, but there you go. And, yeah, sometimes it can look really beautiful and give, like, CD late 90s or mid-90s aesthetics. And other times it's just very loud and doesn't really add much except to give you a slight bit of a headache.
Well, the way the day system works, day-night system, is that it changes the visuals, obviously, and there's a few changes in enemy placements, and yes, some of the mini-bosses do get easier or harder, but as far as I understand from my experience with this, it's not really enough to, like, make an easy boss harder or a hard boss easy. It's just, like, a slight difference. And I believe which time of day you get is influenced by how much time you spent in the previous level.
I suppose that makes sense.
Because throughout this playthrough we do get at least a couple of variants of each level that I'm showing off, so you get some differences to look at the very least. Like, what the fuck's going on here? Like, every time I look back at what the characters are doing, it's like, yeah, I don't know if this is exactly how physics work.
Well, you're using magical ring physics here, mate. We can't exactly apply a one-to-one thing with real life.
I will dedicate my life to developing this to test it.
Oh my god. Just picturing you and Richie using this gimmick here to, I don't know, come visit me or something. Who needs a bus when you could use the ring system?
It's true, but to be fair, I've just come in my car, it's so much easier.
Oh my god, and Flame's just trailing behind.
Yeah, I'm just on a skateboard with a ring attached to your bumper or something.
Oh man, if only the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater franchise hadn't died, that would have been an amazing addition.
So what this is making me think of is when cyclists are taking their dog out for a walk and they're holding the lead off to the side. I've seen some funny accidents happen from that, I'll tell you. So that means Knuckles is basically the dog here.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Anyway, getting back on track here. This level actually doesn't look half bad, with like the setting sun aesthetic and whatnot.
It does look a lot more manageable, yeah.
Yeah, I prefer this more than the, whichever the one with the bright green background was, because, you know, you've got a bit more contrast between the background and the foreground, and yeah, it's just making it a lot easier on the eyes.
This seems a bit more, I want to say, CD-esque in its look than the day stages, which are just, what the fuck, pure colours everywhere.
Alright, it's boss time.
Oh, yes it is, and this boss is actually one of the more difficult ones, because you've actually got to use the ring mechanic. You can't just skimp out on it. This is where you notice the secondary characters can be a bit of a handful in the bosses, and if you're gonna get hit by a boss, it's more likely that they will than you will.
Yeah.
So yeah, this one is pretty self-explanatory in that you just gotta fire your character at the boss itself. Some of them do try to have some more things going on. A bit hit or miss how well that works, but you know.
Oh, Robotnik. You build them, we destroy them. Such is the natural order of things, I guess. Okay. The level just kind of ends.
Yeah, that becomes a recurring trend through this game. I hope you get ready for that.
Oh, I'm ready as I'll ever be, mate. But that's for tomorrow, so come back for the next part of Knuckles Chaotix.